It's the hardest thing in the world is to not fall into a dream of this world, because it will tempt you. You will have a financial shortage that will come over you at some point, and you'll feel it, that you'll think it's real. You'll have an illness come over at you at some point, and it will definitely feel real. People in your relationship strata will lash out, turn against you. You will see things, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and they will make you question whether you're sane or not for actually believing this stuff. However, when you hold steadfast to it and you refuse to cave into it, and you take all the power away from that world out there, what you will discover is that the power of the living Christ will step into the equation and change the appearance of things, overcome the disease on your behalf, cast down the illusion of poverty, or whatever happens, will be something that you of yourself could not do. And that's the magic, is because when you realize that you of yourself cannot do it, that's the liberating moment that allows you to turn to the I am, to the Christ within, to the power of the I, give all power from the world back to the I, and let that be true, and every man a liar. And watch how things begin to first become a little aggravated, become abrupt, maybe. It's like the chemicalization period. It really starts to come up like a Herxheimer reaction, if you will. This is the time that you have to mostly be patient, okay? Love is patient, love is kind. Well, God is love. So you have to demonstrate patience during that season. It's called the season of testing of your faith. Do you really believe what you say you believe? Or are you just, a spiritual weekend warrior on a mission to read a book here and there? You know what I mean? There's a big difference. If you want to read a Wayne Dyer book once a year or once in your lifetime and say you're a spiritual warrior, that's fine. I'm not saying he wasn't great, but I'm saying the majority of people want to read one book and they want to say they know something, but they will never practice it. The difference with what we do is that we follow the narrow path, okay? Same path Mary Baker Eddy followed, the same path Joel Goldsmith followed, same path John G. Lake followed, Herb Fitch, Andrew Womack, the list goes on and on. These are all people that I've delved into for years and years, and they all found one common denominator. And that common denominator is that you exist because God exists, and you never left that spiritual place of perfection, that you are in this simulated dream of material fashion form that the world calls your identity. And the world is looking at that identity, and it's trying to qualify you with God's powers and adding an additional thing, which is bad. It's saying, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. And God is saying in the first commandment, you should not have any other gods before me. Now, that word before is saying, placing that in your attention. You see, it means that whatever comes after follows. So if you have a God of, let's say, I have a pain in my, in my elbow, it's an arthritis. You've just given this material idea of an elbow the power of God to create disease. You see that? And you've also given the human carnal mind the power of God to create at all. And so you have to look at that and say, well, there is no man here with flesh. There is no power to sustain illness. God is all, and God is the only presence, and the only mind operating and governing reality is the presence of God, or good, harmonious life. Therefore, I am of that life, and nothing else could change that. That love came first in line, first in time is the law. Everything else came after. So nothing comes before God. See, I just put that law back in operation and cast out that stupidity of the human race mind. You see? And by doing this day in and day out, what you'll discover is, as I said, at first it may make things worse according to your human appearances, because what it is it's casting everything unlike itself out of you. It's the gold purifying the environment. It's the gospel of good. It's the authority of life saying, look, here's all the garbage that you picked up. I'm just going to bring this up and let you get rid of it. So you might retrace some of your old illnesses. You might retrace some of your old fears about poverty and lack. You might get censored off the internet like I was years ago, and you might lose a business all of a sudden and have to really rely upon this and say, wow, do I really believe what I just said I believed? I was thinking this way and then also enjoying the comforts of having this very, very nice business I built. And when that all of a sudden, every marketing thing I did was all on YouTube. I optimized it for 3 years. I used to have a huge channel on YouTube, and I used to get all of my sales off YouTube. And that was gone in 5 minutes. I had 3 strikes instantly, and I was censored off YouTube and told by YouTube and Google that they would never allow me again to sell health products on the internet. And they can trace you and track you all over the internet with all these bots and algorithms they have. So they know where I show up, and they know if I'm trying to promote health products, and I'm banned for life from promoting health products because I was on the front page of Google for every health condition that you can think of, telling people not to buy drugs and to try healthy things. You see, so there again, well, why did I get cast out from doing that? Because I said that my products were a god, that they were healthy, and that the other products are bad and they're the devil. You see, so essentially that had to be purified, didn't it? So what happened is the truth came in, and it just sandblasted me right out of the pavement and blew me off my business and said, do you really trust me? And I had to spend a week calming my fear down at first. Okay. Because I thought, yeah, I have plenty of money that I set aside, but there's no cash flow now. Now I'm going to deplete my resources, and this is going to really be bad. And then Sabrina had to pray with me, and we were like, okay, what do we do? I'm going to walk and pray and meditate the hills. And I remember holding my thought to this idea. I said, God's good can never be severed, and this supply of love can never be broken. And rich ideas are the substance of my wealth. And I started to hold on to those after several days. It took me to get to that place where I saw the truth. But see, that's the Christ coming to minister to me, is that idea of truth. Once I saw those ideas in my awareness, I was able to calm down the fear. I was able to bring down the terror. And then the inspiration came, and I said, I know exactly what to do. I will begin my ministry and start teaching people how to prosper. From this moment forward, I am a minister, and I'm going to do my first workshop. And I said, I'm going to teach people all the techniques that I've learned, that I just use right now to calm myself down, that I've used before to build businesses. And God brought all the people through grace. Okay. Again, it wasn't because I was a God and my thinking was a God. It was because I was humble. I turned to God. God gave me an idea. I acted on the idea. And by grace, God prospered, because it was me witnessing God prospering God. You see that? And that is the true depth of I of myself can do nothing, is that I am witnessing God prosper God. And once you get to that place, then you're no longer holding yourself down any longer. You see? And then you're not afraid. If you lose everything, you realize that if you still have the desire to give, you've lost nothing, because that desire to give is the source of the abundance anyway. And if you turn to God, God will give you an idea in the capacity that you need to give at the level that provides for all of your needs. You see, if you need a bigger income, what you really need is you need a bigger vision of how to serve more in the world and be of more value, which means you need to turn to God and let that vision be filled by an idea that God gives you and blessed by the grace of God's power, so that the hands of your work are prospered. You see? And then you'll know that it wasn't you that did it. It was God that did it. And that's doing it God's way versus the world's way. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot you can learn from that. And I hope you watch that replay and, I just want to put that out there for anybody. And if you guys don't mind, I'd like to share this one publicly because I think I want everybody to hear this message. I think this is a public message, and I'll cut out the pieces where you ask questions as we go forward if you have personal things. But that rant I just did right there, I want to share that with everyone, because right now what we're going to be facing is we're coming into a hyperinflationary collapse according to the material carnal mind. We're entering war, we're entering famine, we're entering all of the things that the Bible mentions. What are these things? They're the fallout that happens right before enlightenment comes. Just as I mentioned, when we bring truth in, what does it do? It causes everything unlike itself to destroy itself. And everything unlike the Christ right now in this holographic universe, in this extended body of ours, the world, is destroying itself. And this is the cycle that comes. It's the age of enlightenment, but it is the precursor to that is the fallout of all of the darkness, which is lack of light. You see, when the light comes in, it destroys the darkness. You see, that's what's happening. So somewhere along the journey, because you're witnessing this in your reality, you have brought in the light. And because you brought in the light, and the whole Bible is a book about you and your transformation through your own ascension, and it's all characterized by people that are playing stories out that you embody in the world, okay? It is a story about you coming into your awareness that the God of all creation is the only created substance, and you live, move, and have your being in that substance. And there is no evil, there is no matter, there is no fear, there is no lack. And one step at a time, as you change that awareness within your thought, the entire world begins to stir about and create some new thing because you're actually doing it, because it's your universe. That's how deep this really is you are actually demonstrating the whole story of all the revelations right through you. It's coming right through you into your own hologram. And you're the one governing the process by your decision to hold truth or fear, or what they call ignorance. You see? Mm-hmm. That's insane. If you tell the average person on the street that, they think that you're clinically insane, you should be in a white jacket. And the polar opposite is the actual truth, that they are clinically insane and they're dead to the flesh. They've never seen life because they have no spiritual consciousness. Because wholly separate from what they think is their life is the life divine. It's not present in the outer. It's all in the inner, you see? So when you turn within, you allow for yourself to become the channel for that. And so I've been channeling this whole time, if you haven't noticed, but this is all channeling. This is me holding my awareness in, not looking out. And as I turn within, it pours through. And then you'll know things because you're of the one mind that knows all. So, end of rant.
It was interesting too, because you said that. I was thinking I had a class today that was kind of like Monday. I'm going to move on to that. When you first started the rant, I was like, well, what do we say to stop that? And I was like, oh, everything he just said is what we say to stop that in your head. And I think last week, like just to piggyback on that, last week was like emotionally, personally really rough. So I was just barely holding on to class. But they were like nuggets I could hold on to that I could just get my brain wrapped around, and then I could repeat them and repeat them and repeat them and do the ABC process and just keep working through those. And it kept me out of my replay in my brain and maybe panic mode replay in my brain. So it just gave me tools to work with. But it's funny too, because an adult came by to ask me what was going on. Like they wanted to know. And I probably didn't explain really well, but maybe I got some nuggets.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to explain it to them, and I was like, not quite exactly sure, but we're working on not looking outside at everything. We're looking at what the Bible actually means and what the truth actually is.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Um, it says in the gospel of truth, it says to pay, really don't pay much attention to what the outer is doing. Okay. Now, it wouldn't say that if there was a reason why you should pay attention to it. You should not pay attention at all. Like it means nothing. It's an empty carcass, it says, even in the other books. So if it's an empty carcass, then wouldn't it be feasible if you could keep about 80% of your consciousness on the spiritual presence of the great I am as the allness of all creation, and know the qualities of that presence in your thought, and give just a little bit of your little attention to the world out there, just so you don't stumble over things, you know what I mean? If you did that and you shifted the weight differential from like, I'm so focused on the world, I better go chase everything that I want to get something, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to be important. If you just stopped doing all that for a while and you said, okay, I'm going to just draw back and I'm going to allow the spirit to move me. And I'm going to be so humble that I will turn to a divine idea and I will allow that idea to use me. I will serve that divine idea instead of my own desires. You see, if you would do that, then you would discover the true life that you were born to live from. So to the degree that I've been able to do that has been all of my success. And every time I've tried to plunge forward into the world and make something happen that I wanted, that I was so excited about, usually those are just temporal. They're not real. When I first wanted to have a real chiseled body and have perfect abs, and I thought my whole life would be set at that point, I'm perfect forever. I got the abs and I realized nobody cared. And I said, man, that wasn't it. And then I said, okay, I know that when I make over $1 million a year and I'm super rich and I have a mansion and I have exotic cars, I'm going to be important in the world. And I got there in 2013 and nobody wanted to come over. And they didn't really celebrate me when I went out. I lived in a very small town and they weren't very wealthy. And they saw me and thought I was not very cool because it was kind of rubbing them the wrong way. And I got a lot of hate. And I thought, okay, well, that wasn't it. And then, the list goes on and on. I think all these things, they're going to be it. When I get there, that's going to be it. I'm there. I remember when I thought having millions in cryptocurrencies would make me like, I'm going to be so happy when that happens, a dream come true. Well, I achieved that last year. I mean, many, many millions, we hit, it was payday. I didn't use any of it. I gave it all to the ministry. I don't use any of it because I know that's not it. I know that it's going to do nothing for me because I've already done all that. I've already bought the mansion, get all the sports cars, had all that stuff. And guess what? It made distractions for me that took me off my purpose. And I started losing my spiritual root. So what is left then? What are we supposed to do here? Where does real satisfaction, where does real joy come from? It comes from knowing the Father. And that's the only reason we are created in the first place. Everything else is diluting your power and your wealth and all those things, because the Father contains all the real substances, the qualities, Annalise, all the real qualities we're looking for belong to the Father. So if we cling to the Father, then we are fulfilled on every level. I could sit penniless on a corner with nothing on, with homeless people, and I would be wealthier than most people that are on Wall Street that claim to be super rich. Because I know that fulfillment comes from the Father, not from thinking it, from knowing it. Now, that doesn't mean I have to be penniless, because I don't believe that that's God's wealth being demonstrated. I believe that's a deficiency of God's love. So therefore, it wouldn't be too long before I would be wearing the finest clothes if I wanted, and I would be having the life I wanted, because God would clothe me even as he clothes the lilies, you see? because I know that the Father and I are one. So the key is that I don't want you to think that the Father and you are one. I want you to know that the Father and you are one. There's a much, much different reality there. And that comes from holding steadfast through these dreams that you're going to have in the flesh. Whatever is tempting you right now is actually the propensity for you to try and reach the Christ. That's what it really is. It's like the struggle of the plant trying to break through the concrete. You see? The life impulse in you is trying to break through the concrete of old, outdated illusions that have been held in the carnal thought. And as the truth comes in, it looks like concrete material evidence. Like, this is your limitation. You are stuck at this point. You can't beat this illness. You can't beat this level of income. You can't break through this relationship barrier of being alone. It comes to you in all of these ways. And what you must do is you must out persist the enemy. The enemy is the carnal mind. Always. It's ignorance. Your real secret is, I will pray without ceasing until my demonstration comes. So God never gives you more than you can handle, but God also wants to refine your heart so that you really desire that thing and you're not just in it for, like, hey, like, how kids are, like, I cleaned my room. I'm such a good person. Can I get that toy now? It's like, yeah, that was one day. Like, why don't you try for a week and then we can talk? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we come to God like that. I do that all the time. I'm like, okay, God, I did it. Like, let's go next level. God's like, here, let's bring up this thing that you haven't dealt with yet. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, now I got to go through this again, but you go through it with a new set of eyes. You go through it from the level of having already overcome it. You see, that's like Andrew Womack 101, you're coming from the blessing. You're not trying to get a healing. You're coming from the healing. That's how he says it. Now, you come from the healing, come from the prosperity. And you just hold that thought. So I was back in 2018. I had shingles break out all over my face and down my chest. And that was a very, very painful thing. And then I had this thing in my gums, and they had it had a name. Oh, it was called ANUG, acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. My gums were eroding and I was almost losing teeth like in days. It started to spread. Like, I had this nasty illness breaking out all over me. Now, you bet fear was clinging to me real fast because I was losing time, because this was moving fast. So I went right from the ER to the emergency dentist appointment to being ushered out with 3 different antibiotics. I immediately, out of fear, I took the medicine for the first 12 hours. And then the side effects of the antibiotics kicked in, and I felt like I was going to black out, and I had this pain from it. And I said, okay, drugs are gone. I'm going to pray through this thing. So I called in support, and I had people pray with me in support of knowing the truth. And within less than a week, I had the shingles off my face and off my chest. And within a couple of weeks, I had regrown the actual gum tissue that would eroded away. And it's all perfect now. So it's all there. And all that stuff was wiped off of me. But that was a real moment. I was very, very afraid for the first probably 24 hours. It was very, very scary. But what I did was I allowed God to handle the situation and put no other gods before God, which means I didn't say, my power is in these antibiotics. My power is in my own human will. I gave all power back to God and just sat with that truth. So I remember going in the shower, I'd do a set to get out of fear. And I would just say, okay, my life is in spirit. I was never born of flesh. Okay, start there. What do you know of truth? What do you know? Start there. If you keep turning, that's repenting. You repent in your thought. Turn to what you know to be true about God. And then stay in that direction no matter what the argument is coming from the outer world, from your body, from your environment, your job, your spouse, whatever is troubling you. And stay there until, and what happens is the minute you turn back, if you wholeheartedly give all power back to God, then you arrest the situation because you stop the power that it claims to have, which is the power of your thought. The power of disease and the power of poverty and the power of strife claims to have its life in your thought. And that's where it operates in law by saying that you gave it that power. Now, on a microcosm, that's what it looks like with personally with you. And on a macrocosm, it looks like what's happening with governments and their people. So the governments are trampling all over their people and they're saying, well, you're servants and there's nothing you can do about it. We're just going to openly commit fraud and corruption. We're just going to laugh in your face. And that's what any tyrant does. And on the microcosm scale, when you take all of that into your thought and refute that and turn back to the Father, then one with the Father is a majority, and you actually can change first your whole environment, then everything else around you. So you can walk through the valley of the shadow of death, just like the psalmist, and 1,000 can fall at your side, but it won't come nigh thee. Because you changed your thought and gave no space for that strife to enter, you see? And when you do that, that's all you can do. That's all you're required to do in any situation that you're facing. And God will meet you at that level. And by grace, that's where you'll find your healing, your freedom, your prosperity, and all those things. So, Jerry, I see you've left the garden and now you're in the kingdom altogether.
Yeah, I like my background. Yeah. I think what you're saying is so inspiring because it's like it rings true. We know that this is the truth. Practice, and I think that's where the frustration comes in, because sometimes we're impatient, we want immediate results. But like you're saying, constant practice of it has to be the breakthrough.
Yes. So I just wrote the prelude to my new book, and it actually starts with love is patient, love is kind. Well, patient is very important because that's pretty much what love is demonstrating, is patience. And so if we don't have patience, which I've been guilty of in my carnal mind for many, many occasions, right? When we don't have patience, then what we're demonstrating is that we're already defeated. Impatience is the proof you've been defeated already. Because now you've taken matters onto your own hands. And when you do that, you've just taken God's power and said, God's power is actually my human will. Human will is the power now. You're no longer obedient to God. Now you're actually off as the prodigal son saying, I'm going to do this. I've got this. You see? And so inspired action is much different than taking action out of that fear. So that's where I was when, I lost the YouTube channel. I didn't act out of that fear. I had to calm that fear down in my thought first to get to inspired action. And that takes patience. And so that patience was the allowance for love to meet my need. And that's why love is patient. Because when I demonstrated patience, then I created room and space for God to come and minister to me through my thought. But if I had acted in impatience, and if I would have tried to make things happen, and I would have gotten, haughty and proud about my abilities to do something, then I probably would have just doubled down on the problems. And I would have missed the big opportunity because I was trying to do it my way and I wasn't listening. Being silent is really be still and know that I'm God. Just be silent.
It reminds me of Joel Goldsmith's book, Thunder is the Silence. It first really dawned on me when he was saying that instead of reacting, be still. And in order to be still, you've got to let go of impatience and not react, and not fall into judgment. And I felt like I could hear where he was coming from, but trying to implement it, I would get lost.
So with you, obviously, you're a storehouse of wisdom, because the way you said it was perfectly paraphrasing Joel Goldsmith, and Joel Goldsmith was very, very, very good at this. So if you can paraphrase it that well, then where would you think the disconnect is coming in between what you're asking for and where you've been demonstrating? Is probably in that patience, isn't it?
Yes.
And so if you could take that one virtue and use your self-entrainment technique, and you could work on patience for 30 days and scale that up to the point where you just really react with patience, and that's your strength. So here's the idea. I'll give you a secret about patience. Patience is the weapon that forces deception to reveal itself. You use that weapon. See, I use it in every business transaction. You know, I get excited about some ideas, and how do you know if you're talking to somebody who's trying to hustle you or not? Well, starve them out with patience. And you'll find out real quick what their true motive is, because they'll show you, because it's the weapon that forces any deception to reveal itself. And you can do that with everything happening around you too, because you're being deceived by the lawless one in the outer, because it's deficient. So it's coming to you for light, but it's showing its deficiency to you, which is the deception. So when you hold steadfast in patience, you allow the light to come through you and fill the deficiency. And it's the light itself that doeth the work. It's not you. And then the battle is not yours. That's the Exodus 14:14. Then the battle is now the Lord's. And now you see, now we're in a completely different reality altogether. So there, Jerry, that was your breakthrough right there. If you got nothing else out of this whole class, see, in every training you do, you should just try to get one thing that you really master. And if you do that, like Joel Goldsmith used to say, well, I think you should work on the first commandment for a whole year for an hour a day before you even move on to the second commandment. He goes, but practically people won't do that. They want to go through all of it right now. That's a mistake. Because why? That's impatience. See, the demonstration of patience is, hey, I don't need to consume 3,000 books this year. I can take one principle of truth, and I can give myself enough demonstrating it to where I own it, and give myself that patience. And by doing that, you'll be the tortoise that beats the hare. You will outperform virtually everyone around you, because here's what happens. The impatient, hurried life creates a mental state of anxiety that disallows you flow state, first of all, and it also crowds out the still voice within with mental chatter coming from the carnal mind. And that mental chatter is stupid, because it's telling you how to do things that it has no clue on how to get what it wants. And it's beating you up for not having it, because it's clueless. So why try to hurry everything up and get nowhere?
It sounds like what Jesus was getting to with the parable of Mary and Martha. And Martha, he was saying Mary had patience to sit and listen. Martha was busy trying to help. set the table, get dinner going, those type of things. And he was saying, well, she chose the most important. But to the carnal eye, it's like she's choosing to be lazy. We've got things to do.
Yeah. And yet laziness is one of the best virtues of success. Mastering the art of laziness. Hard work gets you nothing but more hard work. The most wealthiest people I know actually just attend meetings. I'm not saying that they're not busy, but I'm just saying that they're definitely not working 20 hours a day on factory labor jobs or anything like that. So what are we really dealing with? We're dealing with ideas. And ideas can only be heard when you're listening. And you got to be able to distinguish between the voice of the carnal mind and the voice of the Holy Spirit. And so you use the weapon of patience. Now, here's the key. This is your secret. The weapon of patience is what spreads the Red Sea of the carnal mind's noise so that you can cross over into the promised land and receive what your Father has for you. You see, there's a lot in that I just said, but that's the secret, is patience opens that channel so you can hear the Father. The enemy has to keep you busy, absent, off, distracted in time, past, future, away from the presence of the present. Again, look at Eckhart Tolle. He just had to sit on a bench and become present to have every desire of this world chase him that he could have imagined. He's not a very strong looking guy, and he doesn't have many physical attributes that you would think would give him that success. But when you listen to him and you really feel the presence of stillness coming through, you recognize that that's the spirit. And the reason why it's clothing itself in wealth is because that's a quality of the spirit.
Yeah, it all sounds paradoxical, like carnal versus spirit.
That's it. That's the war. It's the war between truth and ignorance.
I
Did you say something, Anthony?
Yeah. I just wanted to reference the Lord of the Rings. Remember the movie, that part where they were running across that small bridge and Gandalf stopped the demon-looking thing from coming across to the other side? I always reference that one as maybe him fighting off, like you said, maybe some of those negative thoughts, and he ends up kind of falling in that void and battling. So when he comes out, he is no longer gray, but he's Gandalf the enlightened, the bright, white outfit and everything like that. And I would kind of relate those two sort of.
So what's the message of that? What did you learn from that?
Don't really know, outside of the fact that maybe it's there's the two hemispheres of the brain battling each other until you come into some sort of balance and overcome those negative fear-driven thoughts.
Well, that's very, very close. Yeah. You see, anxiety, the troubled, worried mind, it's actually a trauma. It's a state of being in trauma. So if you're walking around frantically hurrying all the time, that closely resembles the state of anxiety almost to the T. So if you're conditioning yourself to make things faster and go faster and get more done and to get more and more and more done, what are you actually doing?
Focusing on more stuff, bringing yourself more stuff to get done.
Well, that's what you're going to get, but you're actually removing yourself from hearing the voice within. You're being distracted constantly. You've made your reasoning a God. See, God doesn't need you to do anything other than to turn within and listen and to follow and obey. Be obedient to the still small voice within. And you have to discern that voice. And we discovered here that patience is the way to spread that. See, to spread the two hemispheres, if you will, get into the midbrain and to be able to hear that still small voice. The middle path, you see, get right into the right into the awareness of spirit.
Mhm.
So patience, it's powerful. So how can you apply that? How can you apply patience?
Probably instead of reacting with human reasoning, take a step back and say, what is the truth regarding this situation, person, circumstance? And then step back and listen.
Mm-hmm. And recognize that what governs all creation? Wisdom does, God does. And the Holy Spirit is the tongue of God. And God only did one thing in the Bible, speak. So that means we should just get busy listening. And so what I would say is do some sets on patience. You know that you've been patient. Think of a time where you just felt so relaxed and at ease that the whole world could just throw everything at you in that moment, and you just felt so calm that you just couldn't be shaken. Put yourself into that set. Do a set and put yourself into that state. Get used to that state. Put an essential oil that you like to anchor yourself to that state so that every time you're in that state, you smell that oil. And eventually you can just take that oil and just start wearing it. And it reminds you that that's the state that you want to be in. And so I have one. I actually use one of our essential oils that we used to sell, and I use it for, it's not patience, it's joy, but I use it for joy. But you can use an oil to anchor yourself, or something that's a smell works really good. The sense of smell is very powerful. So you do that, and then one second. And then you will condition yourself to just really find your groove in that pocket. It's like this. When I used to play guitar, I was very much off time, because you don't know how to play on time in the beginning. You're just trying to figure out the keys and all that and chords. But the best musicians in the world are in the pocket. They're kind of behind the beat a little bit. They're kind of in the gap, like just it's like it makes it's good when your head starts moving, and that's when somebody's in the pocket. That is from practicing to the point where the rhythm kicks in. And so when you practice a state long enough, then you'll find the pocket, and you'll be able to live in that space comfortably. So it's not so foreign to you anymore. That's what the whole point of sets is. You see, if I'm used to being like, okay, we got to go, let's get our to-do list. Okay, come on, let's go. I used to be that way when I was broke. I was always in a hurry. Like I had to just, come on, let's go. And that doesn't work for me. I don't think that works for many people, actually, unless they have a counterbalance measure to meditate and stop doing that. So what I found is that I learned how to be still. And what taught me was guitar playing. Because I would just feel the harm. I would feel my groove, and I would just be, oh, it feels so calm and relaxing. And that was what got me to stop thinking and to be still. For some people, it could be photography. It could be swimming. It could be hiking. It could be any activity that you can do that brings you into that slowing down, still, meditative, patient state. Then set yourself there, anchor it with a smell, and then you'll be able to take yourself into fast-paced environments where people are frantically hovering around you and causing a bunch of mental chaos. And you'll be able to hold yourself in that space. And you'll be the one making the best decisions in that whole environment too, because you'll be able to hear the small voice within and not being, misled by 1,000 other voices. So, that's just some food for thought. I mean, that's what I've done, and joy has been my resource state. But patience, I actually learned something. So I've been channeling the whole time this message, and I never said that before about patience. I never even know that that was true until just now. So I'm actually going to apply patience. So I learned. So Daniel said, can I go over sets? That's something I teach, Daniel, in the workshops, but I also taught it for free in that book, Trust, the Most Powerful Force in the Universe. So if you can get the Kindle for a few bucks on Amazon, it's like $3. And then you go to the online course that comes in that book, and I teach you through videos that I did at the workshops how to do sets. And it's the most advanced technique I have, because it's using physiology to shift your state. And you can add in the smell too, which I recommend, from the position of being in that state. And then you just, it's like I said with the music, if I practice scales long enough, I'll find the groove and it'll start to sound good. Well, you start to flow good after you practice sets enough. Your body starts to lock in, your whole physiology starts to lock in, you start to just really come into that space. So I've been practicing joy for years and years. So what do I do when I get in joy? Why do I get in joy? Well, it's ironic. I'm just going to launch this tomorrow, and hopefully, it'll be embraced well, but it's something I was excited about. I just created this whole new thing that I'm going to launch. And I created that all in a week. Everything from all the scripts to the audios, to the videos, to the layouts. And it was just from joy. See, joy gives you this ability to really just come into your creative power. Joy is the strength of the Lord. And I think joy is what brings you the Creator's power to be creative. So if you really need to be creative and you really need to tap into creativity, I think joy is your weapon to bring out creativity. It comes through joy. It absolutely does. And so now we've covered 2 of the fruits of the Spirit. And that's what my whole book on trust was mainly about, was about the fruits of the Spirit and how that's the reality of what we were created to be in the world. The offspring of God, which is the qualities of God, the fruits of the Spirit. So far we covered patience and joy. And humility, we covered humility. That was the very beginning of this talk. And then we have, meekness. That's humility, really. And we have kindness. That's part of love, patient and kind. So kindness is the way that you stay in patience, I suppose. Kindness is with a supplement to patience. Because what brings you out of patience? Judgment. And what is judging? It's not being kind. So kindness keeps you in patience. And then what else do you have? You have love. Obviously, love is not a human quality. Love is God. So God is the only existence capable of containing love, or any of the fruits, but love, perfect love is what we're talking about, is God. Perfect love is God. I don't think humans have a way of, I can't even do justice describing what it is, because we don't have the language for it. You know, they say agape or whatever. I mean, that's our best way of shooting at it, but we can't explain it. We can only experience it. People that have told their death stories. There's one that I saw today that you might want to watch. Let me see if I can find the name of it. The guy's name is Howard Storm. It says, a man of science discovers heaven and hell are very real. Howard Storm. Watch his death experience on YouTube. And I think that would be the best way to describe love, because he tries to talk about it from his experience of meeting the Father and feeling that presence when he died. I think that's the best way I could get there with that. And then goodness. Goodness is a quality of God. It's a fruit. So what does goodness imply? Well, if God is all and God is good, then it means every single encounter that you ever come into has to be good. Because you can't leave the presence of God. It's impossible. You would be void of life altogether if you were able to leave the presence of God. You see, if you were able to leave the presence of good, you have done what the Father himself can't do. That's how arrogant the carnal mind is when it creates judgment and it becomes impatient and it removes somebody or something out of love. Because the carnal mind is enmity against truth. It's at war against spirit. So if you find yourself in a situation that you believe is not the good of God trying to become manifest, then what you are asserting is that you have done what the Father himself can't even do. You have achieved something so impossible that all of existence has not accomplished that yet. So meditate on that, I suppose, whenever you think something isn't good that's showing up in your reality. It's your perception that has been labeling things as good and bad, that is coming to be purified in the truth that all qualities belong to God. And so when you strip away all the power that the situation seems to be possessing and give it back to God, all power of good is God's, and there is nothing evil that was ever created, then you have stood in agreement with what God knows to be true, and therefore you're not committing the sin any longer. There's no more sin in you. The sin in you is what is perceiving, misqualifying the evidence in front of you. That's what it is. So what else have you? You have faith. What is faith? Belief in the spirit versus the flesh, the material evidence, what you hear, smell, see, taste, and touch. Are you willing to believe what God says is true in spite of what everything in your body is telling you? You know, do you believe in the wealth of the Father when your bank account says that it needs a boost? Who are you going to believe? So, Jerry, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if that bank account stares you in the eye and says, I have power. I say that you're deficient.
God is all power, and he is the source of all supply. So it's not the truth.
And so you can imply that through patience. And because I and the Father are one, then you can be the witness of the Father receiving the Father's divine love. And that can be what is demonstrated through your experience. And because it is the Father that doeth all the work, there's no obstruction to receiving anymore. The only obstruction was when you thought you were doing the work, because then you have misqualified human will as a God, or the work of your hands, or anything else that you believed. But see, when it's the Father doing all the work and you witnessing the Father in the aspect of the giving from you and the receiving to you, then it is the Father alone, and there is no flaw in any of that activity. There's no mistake. There's no judgment. There's no punishment. There's no consequence. There's no lack. And so therefore you can stand in that good and declare that it is the good that God has bestowed, because you're not tempted by your lying human eyes anymore. And so what happens, Jerry, if it doesn't show up by the next morning? Do you go back to being impatient?
No. State the truth again.
You hold that truth, and you never let it go. The whole world has to steal that truth out of your thought by convincing you that it can't be there, that God must be absent. The thief, they call the lawless one the thief, Jerry. So what is it trying to do? It's trying to steal it and then rob you and kill you. So it doesn't sound like a very good proposition to listen to that voice. It doesn't have good intentions for you. So your power is in those fruits, because that is the real you that God created in the action of living from those fruits. And anything that shows up that is out of alignment in our life, where we throw the universe out of balance with human will, is because we're trying to make up for something that our demonstration of the fruit is lacking. For instance, if I don't see good in the world, then I'm going to try to make up for it by trying to make things happen that I say are good. Do you see that? And what that does is human will shifts the energy out of balance. It tries to say that God's creation isn't enough. So therefore, see, I'm not good enough is the belief behind all that. And it says I have to do more to accomplish what I say is good. And the correction of that is to stand, like Joel Goldsmith would say, in holy ground right where you are, and know that the good that God is bestowing is the good that is being demonstrated right here and right now. And it can never be absent, and it can never be out of your awareness, because God's mind is the only mind here. There is no other mind here. The only perception is God perceiving God's own substance. And see, just as Joel would say, you have to leave man, conditions, circumstances, and people out of your prayer. Otherwise, it is not prayer. And see, that's the way home. And I'm doing pretty good too, because Joel said that you can't get 100 people in the world to follow this advice, even though it was what the master taught. And I've got 5 out of the 100 right here, right now. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. But that's what the master taught, and I've seen the demonstration. I've seen the power of the Christ, and that's all you can ever hope for. Once you've gotten a piece of it, you know that you're on the right path, and that you'll never turn back to ignorance again, unless you're drunk or scared, one of those two things. All right, so I've said a lot, but has anybody got any clarity that they want to bring into the equation, or to like where are we at here is what I'm saying. I don't even know where we're at. I just kind of just gone with this.